Hey, good morning. We are live. Should have just did this a little bit better before I did this. That's all right. We're going to make it work. Welcome to Healing Trauma for Women. I am Angela. I am a breakthrough coach and I help women heal who are looking for more. I help them break through childhood trauma so that they can thrive in peace, freedom, and self-love. You are here in this group. I need to make sure that we are actually live because sometimes I can see comments on my phone and sometimes I can only see them on my laptop. It's wild. Okay. So if you're on, let me turn myself off. Okay, if you're on, let me know that you're on. Say hello. Let me know where you're calling in from. We have such a great live for you today. And in case you are new to the group, I am all about helping you heal from trauma so that really you can break free from old coping mechanisms that are keeping you trapped so that you can thrive in peace and freedom and self-love. And that's what this group is all about. And I've noticed lately that there's a lot of talk about boundaries. And so I really wanted to bust the lid open on boundaries. So if you're on, say hello. Good morning, Nancy. Good morning, Andrea. How is everybody in from Houston? That's so exciting. So if you're on, I want you to get involved and feel comfortable and feel safe. This is all for you and helping you heal and helping you evolve and making sure that you are in a position to really feel comfortable with setting boundaries. And I wanted to make sure that I really talked about this because there's so many things out there about setting boundaries. And I don't know about you, but most of the time, when I see things on boundaries, I always see you're cutting people off, you're saying no, you're doing all these things. And when you come from trauma, or if you have a tendency to please people, or if you have a tendency to not want to have confrontation, then setting boundaries does not feel good at all. Nancy says she's from Orlando. Amber says she's from Oregon. Cool. So we are all over. I'm actually here in California. So that is exciting here in California where it literally looks like it's on fire. It's a really crappy day outside today. But the sun is really pretty, but it's feels like 100 degrees already. And it's humid and it's muggy and gross. So, but that's okay. We're going to have a good day anyway. So what I want to talk about today on day one of our challenge is your beliefs and stories and rules that you have either experienced, you have picked up, or that you have created around boundaries. And I want this to be a conversation that we have because, again, if you have seen things about boundaries in your childhood where if maybe your mom spoke up and then there was this huge argument between your mom and your dad or between a stepdad or whoever, then your natural instinct is to not set boundaries because you are attempting to keep yourself safe. You're attempting to receive love and to, of course, receive attention, which totally makes sense because we're always after having our needs met, especially as children, when we are actually looking for our needs to be met through our caregivers. So if you watched anything like that, you pick up these things that you don't even realize that you are actually picking up. Let me get a drink of water. So what I want you to do today, and I'm going to put some journaling questions here in the chat so that you can have them, is that I want you to become very aware of the stories, rules, and beliefs that you have created around boundaries. Okay, so for me, a lot of mine is I don't want to argue. I don't want to have a confrontation. So I'm just going to let things slide. I'm just going to let things slide until I'm exploding, right? And I'm like, well, I should have said I needed to say something earlier, right? We don't want to should have, but we needed to say something earlier. It is really about being able to communicate, having our needs met. And that's essentially what boundaries really are about. But again, if you've experienced anything that has made you feel very uncomfortable with setting boundaries, you're not going to, okay? So if you're a people pleaser, and not that there's anything wrong with that, okay, we obviously know that it comes from conditioning and trauma, but if you're a people pleaser and all you hear about setting boundaries is no and cutting people off, how likely are you going to be in setting boundaries? You're just not going to, because you're a people pleaser. You want people to feel pleased with your presence and feel pleased with you being around. So of course you're going to do things that make you feel loved and needed and given attention to, right? Of course you're not gonna, tell people that you don't want that in your life or that that's a no for you, right? Because that's super uncomfortable. I never really thought that my boundary issues stemmed from my childhood until you brought it up. Most of our stuff actually stems from our childhood. And it stems from our childhood because it's either been passed down to us generationally or lifetimes ago, or it happens to us usually between the years of 0 and 7, because that's when that imprinting age happens. And so we're not just picking up the things that our parents are saying to us, okay? We lead by example, right? So it's monkey see, monkey do. So if you were watching your parents fight all the time, then you think that that's how a natural relationship goes. You think that that's what it is. That's what it looks like. If you're seeing your mom be able to put down boundaries and speak her truth and everything, and then there's a very productive conversation about it, then you're going to be able to set boundaries and speak your truth and have these beautiful conversations about getting your needs met, not just on your end, but on the end of your partner or, your friends or your family, whoever. But when we have dysfunctional family relationships, especially in our immediate family, even if it's not based on trauma per se, we still pick up these things. No matter what, we pick up these things. Like we were just talking about, we pick these things up about money. We pick these things up about our emotions, about our thoughts, about the way life is, right? There's just so many things that we pick up from our childhood, and it is definitely stemmed from there, whether it's passed on or whatever the case may be. We completely watch, especially during that imprinting age, and pick that stuff up. So our boundaries do not come because we've had shitty relationships. They come because we've experienced and watched our parents possibly have shitty relationships. And then if we have trauma on top of that, which obviously you do, then it just creates these very interesting dynamics. And again, the easiest way and the quickest way for you to feel like I'm setting boundaries right this second, of course, is to reset and rewire your nervous system back to its divine state. Because I cannot do that with you all right here, right now, as quick as possible, then I'm trying to create this awareness so that when you go into setting boundaries, you're aware of the hurdles and things that may potentially take place so that you can actually set these boundaries and feel good about them. Tomorrow, we are going to actually dive deep into what boundaries really are and how to actually develop them. And then on Wednesday, we're going to talk about an action plan and what you can actually do to make them happen. But again, right now we're creating the awareness. And why do you want awareness? Because awareness is everything. Okay. So awareness actually creates the opportunity to decide differently, and decide differently actually creates, changes in your behaviors, in your patterns, and that actually creates growth and healing. I hate conflict. Yep, so do I. So I hold things in a lot, especially in my intimate relationships. I would watch my mother hold things in and then explode. I also saw her speak up and saw how she got attacked for it. So it makes sense why I have these issues and that have them with setting and or maintaining boundaries. Yes, absolutely. So what I want you to do, that makes total sense, Nancy. When we watch these things, and they happen, what your mind is doing is like, whoa, we got to make sure we stay safe. So in order for us to stay safe, we're going to avoid conflict. We're going to avoid confrontation. We're going to internalize everything, and we're going to pretend that we're okay. Well, and what we know, especially as we grow up and as we're healing, is that when we do internalize these things, it does create an explosion, because we are not communicating, one, our feelings, and two, we're not communicating how we need to have our needs met. And so if we aren't doing those things, our natural response is to explode until we cannot take it anymore, right? And we don't want that anymore, because we want to be able to create genuine connected relationships. And in order to create genuine connected relationships, we have to be able to have uncomfortable conversations, right? That helps us grow, that creates vulnerability, and vulnerability creates connection. And so really we have to do those things, even though they're super uncomfortable. But when you do get in the practice of expressing your needs, expressing your emotions, you actually get better at it. And if it's a very productive conversation, which sometimes it's not, if it is created into a productive conversation, then you really start to think, well, why the hell haven't I done this before? Now, what are you going to do when, say, you do express your boundaries, or you do have an open conversation, or you attempt to have an open conversation and it's not received well? Sometimes that's going to happen, okay? And I've experienced this a lot, especially in my last relationship. You still want to do it, because even if it creates an argument, which I know sucks and doesn't feel good, and it makes you feel like you're unseen and unheard and misunderstood, you want to do it for yourself, because you are essentially healing, right? Of course you are, but you are essentially parenting yourself. So you're telling yourself, I see you, I hear you, I understand you, and we are going to have these conversations regardless of the outcomes, because I'm trying to heal you, because I'm trying to let you know that you need to have your needs met. And in order to do that, sometimes that means we have to speak up. And that's where this healing and this parenting comes into place, so that regardless of what happens, you still feel good about how brave you were, how courageous you were about speaking up. Because it's a lot of courage behind speaking up in these things, especially if you know that there's a possibility that you can be rejected, that there can be an argument, that there can be, a confrontation, or all these things surrounding possible situations when you speak up. And this is why I believe that it's important that you reset and rewire. But again, I can't do that for everybody right here in this moment. But it is something that is possible for you, and something that you can do, and it will help you start to step into setting these boundaries so much quicker. So what are some of these questions that I want you to journal on, so that you can start creating the awareness? Because again, awareness creates change. Okay. And the change is where the growth happens. When you're aware that you have these stories and these beliefs and these ideas or these rules about setting boundaries, then it gets easier to set them. It gets easier to be like, you know what? I understand that I have these issues, if you will, around setting boundaries. So now that I'm aware of this, how can I make this more comfortable for me so that I can actually do it? And really what you're doing is you are parenting your inner child, because it is your inner child that has the conflict with setting the boundaries, right? It's not really you consciously, it's your inner child that watched all these things happen while you were growing up, that are essentially preventing you from being able to set these boundaries. So The first question is, what are your stories? And your stories can be like your experiences that you saw as a child. So whether it was confrontation, arguments, whether it caused you trauma, whether you were physically abused from it, whether you had like a narcissist parent and then they went off every time you expressed your boundaries or expressed yourself in any type of way, what stories do you have? Okay, what stories do you have around boundaries? Okay, what are your rules around boundaries? This is important because especially if you are in healing or you're in a bunch of groups or you follow people and you see things that boundaries are saying no, and boundaries are kicking people out of your life and sticking it to them, okay? If you see rules and you've picked up rules like that, and again, you're a people pleaser or you're trying to avoid confrontation, then naturally you are not going to set these rules or set these boundaries because you have these rules around them. So become very familiar around your rules around boundaries. Okay, and what have you picked up that's preventing you from standing strong in your boundaries? Okay, and this could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is. This could be anything. And I'll get into a little bit on how to journal about these here in a second. And I'm going to type these into the chat and pin them up so that you can see them. Okay, again, so what have you picked up that's preventing you from standing strong in your boundaries? Okay, so maybe, for example, maybe you watched your mom set boundaries, tell, your dad or whoever like it is, and then she sticks to her boundaries, for a few days, and then something happens, and then she totally caves into those boundaries. And maybe because maybe they make up and you see, oh, well, when they don't have any boundaries, everything is great and everything is good. So then you pick up these things about setting boundaries. So become very aware of what's preventing you from standing strong in your boundaries. The next question I want you to ask yourself is, how do you want your boundaries to look? Okay, so yes, I want you to become aware of the stories that have been created, the rules that have been created, but I also want you to focus on your desired outcome from this. From what would it look like if your boundaries were already set all the time and you knew that there wasn't going to be any conflict or confrontation or argument? What would that look like for you? Okay, and we're doing this because, yes, I want you to be aware of these things, but I also want you to focus on your desired outcome. Focus on your desired life, whatever it looks like, whatever it feels like, because when you focus more on this, after becoming aware of these, then it helps you get to this desired life so much easier. And because we all know that saying where, focus goes, energy flows, right? So we want you to focus on this. Yes, I want you to be aware of this, but this is your focus. And then, of course, the last question is, what feels good about your boundaries? Okay. And so this can mean absolutely anything. Maybe when you speak up, you actually feel like you're standing up for yourself, like you're standing up for what you believe in, whatever that may be. You feel like you're getting your needs met. You feel really good about a graceful conversation, no matter the outcome. It could be any of these things. Okay. When I started to become very aware of the boundaries that I was or was not setting, I didn't understand that I had these beliefs and these rules about setting boundaries that were actually preventing me from setting boundaries. And I'll give you a little insider story on what happened. So I was really good. Probably around this time last year, I was really good about setting boundaries about what I wanted. And then eventually what happened, because I hadn't been doing it as long as I needed to be doing it, I eventually broke down in even having to establish any type of boundaries at all in my relationship. And it actually ended up hurting both me and him. And so because I wasn't communicating about my needs or having them having my boundaries satisfied, or whatever the case may be, it just created a resentment, but also it created arguments all of the time. And eventually I just internalized everything, right? And now we're not together. And not that, I'm saying that that's what's going to happen if you don't communicate your boundaries and do these things. Just want you to be aware of what happens when we don't become aware of the stories and rules that we have around these boundaries, but also if we don't get comfortable about setting our boundaries. And tomorrow we're going to dive deep into actually what they are and what they really mean, so that you're not always thinking that it means no, because it doesn't just mean no. Okay. There's a huge misconception on what boundaries actually are. And I want to really tap into that and talk about that tomorrow. But first, I want you to, so your challenge, your homework, your action items, or whatever you want to call it, is to answer these journaling questions. And I want you to journal on them so that you can see, okay? The seeing creates the clarity. So that you can see the impact of these rules and these stories and these beliefs around your boundaries, so that you can have breakthroughs and aha moments before we get to the real juicy stuff tomorrow, so that when you get ready to set these boundaries and put them in place, you're like, no, I know that I can do this, okay? So I really, really want you to go answer these questions in journaling, whatever you have to journal. I want you to do that so that it really, really helps you become aware. Awareness helps you create change because you decide differently. I'm the opposite of my mom. She internalized things and I immediately react and don't take time to think before exploding. Yes, and sometimes we do. Sometimes we pick up the opposite thing because maybe what you picked up is I don't want to be anything like her. So anything that she's ever done, I'm doing the opposite. And now it's creating things like, we explode or we react rather than taking the time to listen or to become aware of what's triggering us or anything to that nature. So it does happen. So it's not, I don't want to act like it's one way. We can go either way, right? We absolutely can go either way. It just depends on what it is that we were feeling at that time when we were watching our parents or caregivers, whoever's like immediately in front of you, have arguments or have conversations or express their feelings. It just depends on what we were feeling at that time of the imprinting. I react a lot and explode as well. I'm like two different people at a time. Yes, I completely understand that, but only with my fiance. Yeah, and I completely understand that. And here's what happens in our relationships. Okay, especially when we have trauma, okay, we might be great with everybody else, okay? We might feel really good about setting boundaries with our friends, with our families. We might be really good about communicating our feelings and getting vulnerable with our friends. But the second we have an intimate relationship where you have sex, where you have these relationships where people see you in your most vulnerable state, you push away and you don't want people to see you after you've been vulnerable, right? After you've expressed your emotions, you don't want to be seen in that shame, right? Because a lot of us have been shamed for our emotions and our thoughts. So what we do is we have this thing, what I like to call is a shame hangover, okay? So what happens is you probably get real vulnerable, which is beautiful, okay? It's absolutely beautiful. You express your needs, you express your emotions, and you express your thoughts, and maybe the conversation went really well, and you're so proud of yourself. But then the next day, you think, oh my God, I cannot believe that I opened up like that. I cannot believe that I said these things. Like, what was he thinking? He probably thinks that I'm stupid, that I'm whiny, that I'm clingy, that I'm needy, blah, all the things that start running in our head. And it's because we freak out because we are not used to being close to people like that, okay? When someone sees us in our most vulnerable state, or like we're naked in front of people all the time, and then we're having even more intimate relationships with these people through sex, then of course we naturally start to explode, start to push them away because we are afraid of being seen like that. We are afraid of being vulnerable. And then we have these shame hangovers where ego is like, and we unconsciously and subconsciously start buying into that. And then the next day there might be this huge argument after you've had the most beautiful conversation that was open and productive. And then you probably had passionate lovemaking afterwards, if that's a thing for you. And then the next day you guys are arguing. Well, yeah, of course you are, because you're not used to being seen and heard and understood like that. So we end up pushing people away, and we end up doing it unconsciously, okay? Unconsciously and subconsciously. It's a crazy thing that we do, but we absolutely do it. And it's because what we do is we're like, oh my gosh, this person doesn't really love me like I need them to, so I'm going to start pushing them away. And it's very much in our minds. And some of it's not accurate. Some of it is just not accurate. It's my fiance who gets that a lot too. I completely understand. Every fight I have with him, I go into flight mode and think that I have to move out. I 1000% understand this. And I understand this because I am a runner, okay? That's my coping mechanism, okay? It got to be to the point where my running was so bad that I picked up running as a habit, because so that every time shit was hitting the fan, I could just go run it off. And I highly recommend, if you were a runner, pick up the habit of running, because it literally burns the running out of you. You're like, I can't run anymore. I'm sick of this. Now, if you're not physically in a position to do that, I don't recommend that, but it will help you run that burning energy out of you, literally, no pun intended. So I want you to be aware of that, but we do those things because if our coping mechanism is to run because we want to feel safe, and running makes us feel safe where we're not controlled by the other person, even though we're not really controlled, we're naturally going to run, okay? I run from everything. It is like my go-to. I used to be married once upon a time. And I remember in our argument, and I was not in a good place, okay? I was not in a good place. And I used to this is one of the guys that I used to physically beat up. And so I was I wanted to be left alone. And I had no idea how to be left alone. And I wouldn't run out of the house, but I used to hide in the shower because I wanted to be left alone so bad. Because I was afraid that if I started running, then, he would come after me. So I used to hide in the shower. So I get the feeling of wanting to flee. Okay. I totally and 100% get it. And it doesn't feel good, but it is absolutely a coping mechanism because you're looking to stay safe. I want you to know that not every argument means you gotta get out. Okay. We think that it does, but it's not like that. And we think that it might be that way, especially if it is our significant other, if it's their house or they're the breadwinner or anything like that, because we feel like we are in that vulnerable state. And so in order for us to get out of this vulnerable state and be safe, we flee. Okay, that's essentially how it works. Nancy says, I know what you mean, Amber. I usually fight, flight, and then freeze. Yeah, it's usually how it works. So I hope that helps. Okay. Let me know if that helps. Please let me know if this stuff is resonating with you. Please let me know, if you have any questions about your relationship as far as that goes. I cannot give you any relationship advice. What I can give you is how to learn how to deal with your trauma and yourself so that you know how to be the best version of you in a relationship. Okay. I'm not the one to give relationship advice. I am not. No. Okay, Amber says this is definitely resonating with me. Okay, great. Good. I'm glad that this is helping. So let's talk about journaling a little bit, so that for those of you that don't necessarily know how to journal, how you can actually answer these questions. Nancy says, yes, absolutely. I could resonate with what you have been saying. Okay, cool. I'm glad to hear that. So again, I'm going to put the journaling questions up here in just a second. But this is how you're going to journal with these questions, is you're just going to look at these and you're just going to allow yourself to free write, okay? Try not to judge yourself. Try not to create any interjections. Just allow yourself to flow. You know everything. You know everything about you and your trauma and your coping mechanisms. Just allow yourself to go into this free flow of writing so that you can get all the answers that you're looking for, okay? And you don't, if it's uncomfortable for you to write, then I highly recommend setting a timer for 5 minutes and then being done, and then maybe taking a 5-minute break and then come back to it. What you will discover, though, is that sometimes you think that you know all of the stories or all of the rules around your boundaries, and then a week later, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's a crazy story that I have around boundaries. So it will happen, but this awareness, again, is just, we're busting the lid open, right? We're creating that awareness so that you know what you can do when it's time to set these boundaries, or that you're aware of these hurdles and these stories and things that are running subconsciously and unconsciously that are actually preventing you from setting the boundaries that you truly desire. So again, journaling is a free flow specifically on these questions. Now you can journal anytime, please do. Okay. I will advocate for journaling every day of the week, but please go in and answer these questions and allow yourself to free flow. Journaling is really about helping you create clarity, helping you create self-connection, and helping you create a safe space so that you can freely express yourself. That's what journaling does. That's what it allows you to do, because you have very much been in a situation, all of us have very much been in a situation where we are not allowed, or we don't feel safe to have our thoughts and feelings. And so what do? We internalize them. And when they're internalized, they're running around in our head, creating this distorted reality that is not actually true, because we have no way of letting go of that energy or letting go of those thoughts. So they just keep spinning around. What you'll notice is that the more you journal and the more you let loose on these thoughts and these emotions freely, is that the less this stuff spins around in your head. So even if you decide that you don't want to answer these questions, that's fine. I want you to, but I highly recommend that you journal, because it will be one of the most positive things that you will pick up in your life. Andrea says, I'm aware of how often I was told no and why I now say yes when I mean no, and how my mother and my grandmothers and my men as well as avoiding saying or confronting. Yep. No one ever said anything. I remember feeling the anger and energies in the room. Yes, absolutely. And it's just so interesting how that kind of stuff imprints on our little brains and our little bodies at the time, because what we don't understand, and some of us don't even understand this until we're much older, and even if we do, but what we don't understand at the time is that our own parents and our caregivers, grandparents, whoever they are going through their own shit and usually don't know how to deal with it. And so what do? They just project it onto us. They just put it onto us, right? And even though we might have heard no all the time, and then we don't feel like we're allowed to have our needs met, or we don't feel like we can speak up or do these things, it creates this thing that we can't ask for things. Our needs can't be met. We're not allowed to ask. We're going to avoid confrontation, right? Even though you felt like you could ask for these things or get told no over and over when you're a child, they eventually imprint on us. And it's the most interesting thing that it creates. Because eventually what happens is the conditioning resets us. The conditioning rewires us. Yes, the trauma does for sure, but the conditioning just kind of adds to it, right? So the trauma is like the cake, right? And I actually was talking about this just like a few weeks ago. The trauma is like the cake, okay? So we have this layered cake, okay? Maybe we have physical abuse in this layer. We have sexual abuse. We have spiritual abuse, emotional, mental. And then we have conditioning, which is this pretty little icing all over the cake. But what we think is that we have to kind of deal with this icing. We've got to deal with this in order to even like get rid of the icing, if that makes sense, right? Because you can always scrape the icing off the cake, but the cake is still there. So yes, the conditioning does reset and rewire, but it's usually on top of the trauma that makes things worse. And that's why you feel like you have to flee. That's why you feel like you have to fight. That's why you feel like you freeze, because you're feeling unsafe. Because when you are in arguments, when you are in confrontations, your body naturally resets back to trying to keep you safe, because that's what you experienced as a child. Because our trauma is not held in our mind, it is held in our body. And our body remembers everything. Just because you cannot consciously does not mean that your body does not, okay? And another thing, when you like start to cry every time you express your emotions or anything like that, your emotions are held in your body as well. They are not coming from your mind, they are coming from your body. When you learn how to reset and rewire your nervous system, all of this becomes easier. Everything that you do becomes easier, because you do not feel like you have to run the same fear-based programming over and over and over and over. But again, we're about to create a word just about creating awareness so that you feel more comfortable doing this no matter where you're at, okay? I want you to be able to have something tangible that no matter where you're at, you can absolutely set boundaries and feel good about getting your needs met and speaking up. Now, again, this might take some practice, okay? It might take some practice feeling really good about speaking up with your boundaries. I know that in the latter part of this last relationship that I was in, when I started to express my boundaries, I was just like, why haven't I been doing this? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And yes, it would create arguments, but at that point I was just like, I don't fucking care. I really don't. You're either going to get pissed off about it and act like a child, or you're not. So I'm just going to continue to do this, right? And so you get to decide which state of being that you are going to be in when you have these boundaries. Now, that doesn't mean if it does create an argument or if it creates a tiff or whatever, doesn't mean that you're not going to have feelings about it. Of course you are. These are your partners, potentially your family or whoever. But you want to be very proud of yourself for speaking up when you normally wouldn't, okay? That's healing in itself. You want to be very proud of yourself when you attempt to have a productive conversation with someone when you normally would not, okay? Because that is healing, that's growth, that's change. We think that growth is supposed to be this big, huge, astronomical thing, but really it's in these tiny things that we get brave enough to do that really move us forward, that create this growth and this change and this healing. And that's what all of this is really about, so that these little things can add up to massive progress by the end of the year. And that's really what we're after, okay? Healing is very much a journey, okay, and does not look like a destination. I promise you, when you feel like you're like, oh yeah, I've completely healed, I'm totally cool, and even though I want you to claim that you are healed because I feel like that's super empowering, you realize that this stuff is like an onion and it comes in layers. It comes in layers, okay? And I want you to be aware of that, because actually my ex contacted me this weekend and told me that, you fake being healed. And I was just like, you don't even know what that looks like. And that's fine, because I did experience a lot of healing in our relationship, and I'm not going to act like I did or I didn't, right? Because that's ridiculous. And I talk a lot about it openly with everybody in my group. So I was just like, I just told them I'm going to stand strong in being healed, because you don't know what that looks like. So I thought that that was really interesting. And I thought it's interesting that we're talking about that now. So someone needed to hear that. Okay. Healing is very much a journey. It's not a destination. It is getting really comfortable with the journey itself, instead of always seeking that there's going to be a magic pill, like someone's going to have the magic pill. I don't have the magic pill. I have things that work, absolutely, but I do not have the magic pill. And anybody out there that claims that they have the magic pill, I promise you they do not. Because if we had the magic pill on healing, someone would be rich as fuck already. So, and we don't have that. It's not real. The magic pill is getting comfortable in the journey of healing, because it really does come in layers. Okay, if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them. Let me get these journaling questions in here for you so that you can have them. What are your stories around boundaries? Hopefully I spell everything correctly. Okay, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I'll have to probably go in and correct this. What are your rules around boundaries? I have an itch in my nose. Okay. I don't know how to tab down. Okay, we're just going to do this whole thing. What have you picked up that's preventing you from standing strong in your boundaries? How do you want your boundaries to look and feel? And what feels good about your boundaries? Okay, and really you gotta get connected to yourself so that you can figure out what this looks like and feels like. The more and more you connect with yourself, the more and more that you are willing to look at the mirror, the easier this kind of stuff becomes. The easier this kind of stuff is for you, okay? So please, okay? The whole point of the challenge is not so that I can sit here and talk to you, even though I absolutely love this and I adore this. The challenge is really about you taking what I'm telling you and putting it into use. So I want you to give yourself at least an hour to journal on all of these questions and see what comes up. Because tomorrow when we go live, which I think we're going to go live 9-10 o'clock or something like that. I have to tell you for sure. I don't have a babysitter right now. But anyway, I want you to be able to have aha moments and breakthroughs and be able to see these things. So tomorrow when we get into the juicy stuff, you're like, I am totally and completely ready to do this work and completely ready to set my boundaries and completely ready to feel strong in who I am in doing this. So please be sure that you answer the journaling questions that are here. I'll just leave them in here like they are. I didn't realize every time I pushed enter, it was going to put them in. Does that make sense? So I want you to very much do these journaling questions and become very aware of your stories and your beliefs and your rules around setting boundaries. And not only that, I want you to really focus on what would it look like if all of my boundaries were communicated, I stand strong in them without confrontation, without an argument, so that you can actually feel really good about doing this. Because what happens is when you become focused on what you desire, then you start to create that little by little without even really feeling like you're making an effort on doing that, okay? Do we have any questions? I want to make sure I get to any questions that we might have here in the last 15 minutes. I hope this is resonating. I hope this feels good to you. I'm excited to see what your answers are tomorrow. Again, I want you to feel feel comfortable to share, but please only share what you feel comfortable with sharing with. Some of these stories are really like dark and deep, and I understand that, and I 100% respect that. So whatever you feel comfortable with sharing, I want to hear about it. I want to hear about your aha moments. I want to hear about your breakthroughs. I want you to become aware of the things that really you didn't even know were preventing you from setting boundaries in the first place. This is the first step. Awareness is always everything. Do we have any questions? I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to take a drink. Do I need to clarify anything of that nature? If you're watching the replay, let me know that you're watching the replay. If you have questions while you're watching the replay, be sure to ask them. I will get back to you. I'm usually pretty good about getting back to the questions that are being asked in these. So please be sure to ask them, feel comfortable in asking them. We are all like on the same journey pretty much here. So if there aren't any questions, I'm going to let you go. Please do the homework so that we can have a really juicy conversation tomorrow, and so that we can dive deep into all of the good stuff tomorrow about what setting boundaries are, and really a lot of misconceptions about watching boundaries. I'll be catching the replay. Okay, that's totally cool. So tomorrow I'm thinking we're probably going to go live about 9 o'clock. So I will let everybody know for sure in the group as I do, but I'm pretty sure that we will go live about 9 o'clock because I think that that's what works best for me. So if you're watching the replay, let me know that you're watching the replay. Leave your questions. Come with your homework tomorrow. I am very excited to hear about your ahas and your breakthroughs. I know that you're going to have them if you do the homework. All right, ladies, I hope that you have a great day. And again, I'm Angela, and I am the founder of AsFreeAsYouSee, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.